Hey everybody, how's it going? Forrest here. Thanks for tuning in to another installment of my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorales. We're going to be looking at Christ lag in Todesbanden today, which translates to Christ lay in death's bonds. This is an interesting chorale, has some unique quirks about it, some interesting tonal characteristics, and I think we should just go ahead and get started. So if we go ahead and compare the first cadence that we have no key signature, so mind you, the first cadence is on A major, which could, lead us to think that, oh, well, maybe we are in the key of D minor when we compare it to the last cadence, which is very clearly a sort of a 5-1 with a Picardy third, implying D minor, and the first cadence is on A, so that might be a half cadence in D minor, and this is just another one of Bach's chorales where he doesn't write the B flat in to the key signature, but we're in the key of D minor. I do think that we start in the key of A minor because the first cadence is very clearly A-centric, and then it turns into D minor as we progress, and even flirts with the idea of F major as well. So we start on a 1 chord, we don't start on a 1 chord, we start on a 4 chord. This is where the intrigue is. We have a passing tone in the tenor as well. The intrigue is in the fact that we start on a 4 chord. You might be asking, wait, why wouldn't we just say that we start in the key of D minor? And I think it has to do with the fact that we have G sharps throughout and we have F naturals. We're very clearly using a pitch collection that belongs to sort of the A minor idea. We don't have B flats yet, which would be a very clear identifier that we are in the key of D minor. They don't come until the third complete measure. So I think we are in the key of A minor, and it's not atypical for Bach to start on a chord other than 1. We've seen him start on 6, we've seen him start on 5, and now we're seeing him start on 4. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. That being said, we immediately go to a 5 chord. We have D, B, F sharp, or F natural, and G. And this F natural is very fleeting. It's really this E natural that happens on beat 1 and that tells us that we are looking at an E7 chord over B. So that would be a 4-3 chord. And that immediately goes where we would expect it. It goes to a 1 chord. More specifically, it's not a 4-3, it's a 4-2, my apologies. So we go to a 4-2, and as we've seen with 4-2 chords, 4-2 usually goes to 1-6, which is what it does, C, C, A, and E. Then we have some passing tones in all the voices, and this probably spells out a chord, but I'm just going to call them passing tones because they don't happen on a significant beat. We have B, B, G sharp, and B, D, G sharp, and B. That's a G sharp diminished triad over B. That would be a 7-6, and we would expect that to go to a 1 chord. It does. More specifically, it goes to a 1 in root position. And then the bass leaps up an octave, creating another syncopation. And then we have here, we have F, B, D, and G sharp, or A. I think this A is counterpoint, and we're really looking at this G sharp and this E right here. And really what we're looking at is a 5-7 chord over G sharp, which would be a 5-6-5, and E7 over G sharp. And we would expect a 5 chord to go to 1, especially 5-7. We have this suspension here, this 9-8 suspension, because B is going down to A, but he interrupts the chord with another vertical sonority during the resolution, which is interesting. So this is really just a 1 chord in root position. And then we get F, F, A, and C. It goes to 6 sort of in passing, even though all of these chords are either passing tones or non-chord tones. I'll mark them, and I'll put the chord in parentheses as well. But then we have D, A, F, and B. That's a 2 chord in first inversion, and it's half diminished, and it's a 7th chord, so 2 half diminished, 6-5. We then have E, E, G sharp, and B. That goes to 5. I'll put that in parentheses as well, with a passing 7th in the tenor, because it's happening on a weak beat. I'll do that right there. And then we have A, C sharp, E, A. It's a really beautiful cadence, actually. The A hits you kind of out of nowhere, which is something that I didn't necessarily expect when I was first listening to it. But when you hear a picardy third, like in the middle of the piece, it has a different effect. It makes you guess a little bit. Are you listening to a half cadence, or are you listening to a perfect authentic cadence? And in this case, I do think it's a perfect authentic cadence. That's the way it sounded to me, but I could be wrong. If you think that you heard this first cadence as a half cadence, maybe voice your opinion in the comment section. That being said, we just end on a 2-6, or in this case even more elaborate, 2-6-5-5-1. So really 2-6-5, which is B, D, F, and A, versus E, G sharp, B, and D. Like, the cadences get contrapuntal, so it's hard to pick apart exactly where the chords are happening, but the fact that the ideas are there, the fact that this is a chorale texture, does make it a little easier to vertically line up harmonies. Okay, so now we have to look forward to the next cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D minor. Not really a lot of space to write there, but that says perfect authentic cadence, PAC, in the key of D minor. And if we're thinking about that in mind, that means that there has to be a modulation at some point. And we get a C sharp, an A, and an E here. So what I think is happening is that this A, which is 1, is turning into a 5 in the key of D, which does kind of fuel the idea that this is very possibly a half cadence. But I think what Bach is actually doing here is that he's just using it as a pivot chord. He cadences on A major because it's the dominant of the key that he's moving to. So we're going to call it 5. This turns into a 5-6 here. I'll just put a 6 there because he inverts the chord, and there's some voice exchange here. As you can see, the tenor C sharp turns into a bass C sharp, and the bass A turns into a tenor A, while the upper voices stay static, no motion. And we would expect this to go to a 1 chord, which it does, D, A, and F. This E is a part of a 9/8 suspension, so we go directly to 1. We have some passing tones going on. That D is actually a chord tone, so I'm not going to mark that. And that F is also a chord tone, so I'm not going to mark that as well. But technically what's going on here is that the chord is inverting. And here we have our first B flat, so we're pretty clearly in the key of B minor by this point. We have E, B flat, C sharp, and G. That is a fully diminished 7th chord, but instead of it being in root position, it is in first inversion. So this is a 7 fully diminished 6-5 with passing tones in the alto and the bass. We then have C sharp, A, E, and A. That is an A major chord, which would be 5, and it is over C sharp, which would be putting it in first inversion. We then have, it is a chord tone, we're just going to call it 5-3 right there. And then we have D, A. I think this is an accented non-chord tone here, D and F. I think a 1 happens on beat 4 and, but I'm going to mark the 1 happening here because the 1 and the 5 are in the bass. That's where the chord is starting to be established. Okay, next system. So then we have A, C sharp, and E. That's a 5 chord very clearly. And then we have F sharp and D. As we get closer to the cadence, it gets more and more contrapuntal in texture. So we're going to mark these as just passing tones or neighbor tones or non-chord tones. We'll just lump them all into one. A, G, C sharp, and E. This is kind of, we just get a 7 chord here as the bass leaps down an octave. We have an E in the tenor. We have a C sharp again in the alto, and then we cadence on 1. So we just have 5-7 going to 1, and it's just really a big 5-7 gesture here with F, which would be our flat 13 as far as A7 is concerned. So that's what the counterpoint creates, because we get like D in there, which is like an 11, and we get F in there, which is flat 13. So there's counterpoint that's enriching this dominant and turning it into like an altered dominant, but that rich texture that comes from the A and that comes from being the higher voices being over an A in the bass is just it's a byproduct of the dominant being the prevailing function of the chord in this in these first 2 beats. Okay, so let's go ahead and look to the next cadence. We get a perfect authentic cadence on, or sorry, it's not perfect authentic cadence, it is an imperfect authentic cadence on F, because we have an A in the soprano. We have an A in the melody. So this is definitely a perfect authentic cadence, or sorry, it's an authentic cadence, but it's imperfect because we don't have the tonic in the melody. So D, F, A, D. We're going to go ahead and just say that we've already modulated to F here. We're just going to go ahead and say that we've already modulated to F here, and we're going to call this a 6 chord because D minor in the key of F is 6. It's our relative minor. We have some passing tones in the tenor and the soprano, and then we have D, A, D, F. Again, it's just the same chord. It's still a 6 chord. Passing tone in the bass. We get B flat, G, D, G. That's a 2 chord, a G minor triad over B flat. That is a 2 chord in first inversion. And then we have some passing tones in the other voices. That's an A, a C, and a G. I think those are just passing tones. There's really not a discernible chord from that. That would be like a 3/7, but I don't think that's really what's happening here. We have G, B flat, and then the tenor and the alto double B flat D. Some passing tones as well. So this 2/6 chord turns into a 5/3 chord. And then we have D, A, D, F. It goes back to 6 in root position. And we have some non-chord tones going on in the other voices. We have A and F. The voice crossing between the tenor and the alto is always a very interesting moment. So we have C, F, A, and F. We could kind of say that there is a little bit of a 1 going on here. I'll put it in parentheses because it's such a fleeting moment. Then we have B flat, F, D, and G. That's an interesting moment. B flat, F, D, and G. That is a 2 chord in a 2/7 chord in first inversion, so a 2/6/5. And then we have C, E, C, and G. That is a 5 chord, but it's happening on a weak beat, so I'll put it in parentheses. And then we cadence on F, F, C, and A. That's just a 1 chord in root position. So that 5, really this feels more like 2 going to 1 because this 5 is so slow, or it's such a quick, it's not slow at all. It's the opposite of that. It's a very quick moment, so we're not really getting 5 for too long a period of time. But I imagine in anticipation for the fermata, like the way that I arrange these chorales at the beginning of the videos that I make, I do a little bit of a rallentando going into the cadence, going into the end of the phrase, so that the end of the phrase sticks out a little bit more, as opposed to just sustaining it and keeping a static tempo. And that 5 lasts a little bit longer as it's part of a rall. Okay, so now we have F, C, F, and A. That's just a 1 chord again in root position, so we don't need to reanalyze it. We have some passing tones in the bass and the alto. And then if we look ahead, we have a cadence on A minor. So I think that we're getting ready for a modulation. I don't think it happens quite yet because we have B flat going on. And because we have B flat going on, I think it'll happen post B flat. Maybe over this G sharp, perhaps. We shall see. So we have D, F. Or actually, let's go ahead and say that our modulation to A minor happens here over this D minor. So this is a D minor triad in root position. If we say that we modulate to A minor here, that means this D minor is now recontextualized as 4. We have B flat here, and then we have C sharp, E, G, and B. We can just call that 7, 7/4/3, fully diminished of 4. And then we get D, F sharp, A, and D over F sharp. That's a D major triad in first inversion, which is just 4/6, right? Because with the A melodic minor scale, we get F sharp, which turns 4 into a major triad from a minor triad. Then we have G sharp, B, E, and E with a passing 7th in the soprano. That's just an E major triad over G sharp, so 5, 6. And then we have A, E, and C with sort of like a 2-1 suspension going on here. And he does the same thing as he did earlier, where he interrupts the suspension with another chord. It's really interesting because the bass changes. The bass is very active in this piece, but this is just a 1 chord as we've expected 5 chords to go to. And then we kind of have a little bit of passing tone going on here, or a little bit of non-chord tone. This is just a 6 chord. I'm going to put it in parentheses because it's a very brief moment. Then we have D, A, F, and D. That's just a 4 chord in root position, a D minor chord. And then we have, again, on this weak beat, we have E, G sharp, E, and B. That's just a 5 chord. And in anticipation for a perfect authentic cadence in A minor, we get a 1. So we have 4, 5, 1. A lot of root position going on as the bass is very active in outlining the roots of the chords. If we look ahead to the next cadence, we get the most beautiful part of the chorale. We get a cadence on B flat major, and I think it's at this point where we modulate back to D minor in anticipation for the end of the piece. And if we see a cadence on B flat, especially when it's preceded by an A major triad, right? A, C sharp, and E, I think we have a deceptive cadence here because it's 5 to 6, which is our textbook deceptive cadence in anticipation for, or preceding rather. I keep on saying in anticipation for. What I mean to say is before our perfect authentic cadence. Sorry, I keep breaking my pencil lead here. I think I need to get a thicker gauge to prevent that from happening as much. We have perfect authentic cadence right at the end here. So let's go ahead and call, where does the modulation happen exactly? Well, I don't think the modulation happens immediately because we have a C major chord immediately afterwards, and I don't think we're going to see a C. I guess it ultimately depends on where it goes. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and just say that the modulation happens here. So we go to a D major triad, or let's see, we have D, D, F, and B. That's a 2 chord, 2 diminished in first inversion. Then we have C, or C, C, F, or C, G, F, and C. I think this F is a suspension. It's a fourth part of a 4-3 suspension. But it's going to go to 3 here, and then we leap up an octave, and then we go to F. 3 goes to 6, right? I think this is where the modulation happens right here, 6, because we get B flat immediately afterwards. This 6 is going to be respelled in the key of D minor as 3. So go from 3 here, with some passing tones going on, to A, C, F, and A. So this 3 chord is now just 3, 6. It's the same chord, just respelled with the third of the chord in the bass. Then we get B flat, D, F, and C. So these are just some passing tones creating an, just a fleeting harmony. Then we have C, E, E, and G. That is a 7 chord. It's either a 7 chord or it is 5 of 3, which I don't think it is 5 of 3. We get A, C sharp, E, and F, or D. I think this, let's see, D, A, C sharp. I think this is mostly just contrapuntal going on here. I think I need to do a little bit of meditation as to what exactly is going on here. But there's definitely some 5 going on right here, because the A, the C sharp, and the E. This F just creates a very brief moment of suspension going on. This 6 over the A creates an interesting moment. But we know we're getting ready for a cadence on 6. So when we get G, B flat, C sharp, E, this is really, I really do think that this entire section is just sort of implying dominance in anticipation for everything that's going on. Even though we have F, A, D, and F here, I think it's safe to say that there's sort of like a 1-6 going on here, even though it's happening on a weak beat. Then we get, again, G, B, C sharp, and E. That is a C sharp fully diminished over G, which would make it second inversion. And then 7, then goes to A, C, and E, 5. Really, even though I'm analyzing all these chords right here, what's the big takeaway? The big takeaway is that Bach is doing contrapuntal things. This right here is not really chorale texture. This is very, there's syncopation in the alto, there's straightforward rhythm in the melody, very active bass and tenor line. I really do think that there's like a big 5 going on here, and I'm going to circle 5 because really, even though there's like 7 in here and 5 and 1, 6, I think it's just because the motion is just a big 5 preceding a 6. There's B flat, there's C sharp. The trajectory is this D right here because we have C sharp going up, but the bass is upwardly trending towards B flat. So I think with all of the voices having their own trajectory, they all arrive on B flat in this really beautiful consonant moment after being preceded by this lengthy dominant with a lot of counterpoint, a lot of dissonance going on here, a lot of suspension, a lot of these floating contrapuntal harmonies going on. So it's hard to pick apart exactly where the chords are happening, but I do think the big takeaway of beats 1 and 2 are dominant. They're a dominant sound. All right, then we have F sharp, A, D, and A. I guess we can call that 4 of, we can call that a 4 major in first inversion, so just a D major chord in first inversion. And then we have G, B flat, E, G. That's an E diminished triad over G, so a 2 diminished 6. Then we have A, C, F, again, where we have this F over the dominant, which turns into E, sort of like we have a 5 chord here, and it turns into a 7, but then really what's going on here is sort of like a 6-5 suspension over the A, because F is a 6th above A, and then it resolves down to an E. It's interesting how a 6th to a 5th without that dissonance can, like two consonances, like a 6th is a harmonic consonance, and a 5th is definitely a harmonic consonance, and even when you see the 6th, usually what creates the beautiful sound in a suspension is the dissonance resolving to a consonance, but with two consonances you still get a really beautiful sound. So instead of calling this like a 3 augmented, this is a dominant, I think, or like a dominant flat 13 with sort of a suspension going on in the upper voice, and there's some counterpoint going on in the alto as well. But I really do think this is just a 2-6 to a big 5, and then we have D, G, another suspension here, but this one's 4-3, but we have D, A, and D, and we cadence on 1 in a perfect authentic cadence. But yeah, one of the big takeaways is that cadences can be particularly difficult to hash out. Like, what exactly is going on when you're looking at a cadence and you see all the voices having their own rhythm and there aren't clear vertical sonorities? You know, the reason why I picked out the chorales is, or one of the main reasons, is that the texture makes it easier to analyze harmony in a more granular fashion. Like, you can go from beat to beat and analyze each chord. But in the case of Bach, because the Baroque period is associated so strongly with counterpoint, it's harder to pick out the harmonies in some sections, and you need to make inferences about, you know, what exactly the bass is doing and what harmony is being implied, even though there are clear non-chord tones happening in places that make deciding the chord that much more difficult. But that being said, thank you so much for checking out the channel. Thanks for supporting my journey to analyze all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations, and I will see you all tomorrow with the next analysis. Take care.